CanPL.ca Newsroom for this week. Marty Thompson and Charlie O'Connor Clark. We're going to have Tommy Wheeldon Jr. on later on in the show. He has some interesting tidbits about the Cavalry season that I guess formally has started their preseason. FC Edmonton formally started preseason as well. I'm not sure what you're hearing from around the league right now, Charlie, but everyone just seems pumped to finally get out on the field.
Yeah, it's probably just so nice to be outside and on a football pitch again. That I think even Tommy said it. He's like, we've just as you guys will notice when we play the interview, but he's just like, man, it's just so nice to be outside that we're not even thinking yet about how we're playing. We're just so happy to be there.
Well, yeah, and it's the same thing. I talked to Alan Koch at FC Edmonton, and he's like, yeah, no, we have 21 players. You can't even do 11 aside. But yeah, it's like, it doesn't matter. He's like, I can't properly do like some of the stuff that I want to do because of protocols and restrictions, but it doesn't matter. But they will continue to follow those. And Athletic Ottawa in Madrid, they're having a great time.
Oh my God. They have like the head chef for Atletico Madrid cooking for them. And my God, it just sounds amazing.
Yeah, cut to Chris Manella last week, just sitting on the villa, sitting on the porch, just like crushing it. Tommy Wheeldon Jr. in Calgary, a lot different than Spain in Madrid. Busy week in Canadian soccer. Let's talk about the Canadian women's national team quickly here, Charlie. Beating England 2-0. The goals were strange. They didn't look like they were going to come if it weren't for those two sort of, I'm going to say, opportune chances for Nichelle Prince and then obviously Evelyn Vaince. What was your thoughts on the game and how Canada came away really, with an impressive result ahead of the Olympics?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily pretty, but I think it was pretty much what Canada was looking for in a game against England. I think it was pretty clear from the start that they went into that expecting not to have the ball a whole lot. And it was interesting to see Bev Priestman being able to switch up her tactics like that. Like she kind of set the team up to absorb some pressure and hit on a counter a few times. And in games like that, sometimes you just hope that the other team makes a mistake and you pounce on it. And England made some pretty bad ones. So they were, to be fair though, the first goal, like the Evelyn Vienne goal, that was also pretty good awareness to kind of drift out wide and try and get back on side, and then just sort of notice the defender take that touch and immediately pounce on it and make the finish. So she still deserves some credit for that. But yeah, I mean, when you're absorbing pressure and you're not the team that's dictating play, then you just hope for mistakes. And I think the defensive play was really, really good. And that's probably as good as you can hope for.
Because England still looked quite good in possession at times and threatened in a big way. But I'm trying to think if there were many, clear-cut scoring opportunities from England, maybe a couple, to hit the crossbar off that free kick. But otherwise, Canada really did hold their ground in a way that maybe we didn't expect them to. I mean, I certainly didn't expect them to after She Believes. Obviously, the Brazil result comes to mind, but that came down to a few pretty bizarre mistakes themselves. But, were you surprised to see Canada this staunch in defense?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wasn't expecting a clean sheet, that's for sure, against a team like England. And the defending was it wasn't just well-organized defending where you're just kind of shutting them down, which Canada did on plenty of occasions. Just the work rate was incredible. You would see players I think we saw Vanessa Gilles do it at least once, and I'm pretty sure Ashley Lawrence and a few different players just tracking back over 40 yards to track down an England player, usually a substituted England player who's just full of energy, just streaking down the wing, and a Canadian defender would show up behind them and take the ball away. So it was really impressive to see kind of the way they bought into that kind of defending, and really a good sign that they were able to do that through 90 minutes, because they definitely could have broken at a lot of occasions in that match. And there were a lot of times where it kind of came close, but they didn't, and credit to Canada for not.
Give me a couple takeaways from these two games, because obviously there was the win against against the Welsh. These are the only games scheduled before the Olympics. I mean, obviously, you would expect Canada to play again, but with COVID-19, you never quite know. That's kind of how you have to play it at this point, if you ask me. So what were some things that we learned about this team going into the Olympics?
Yeah, it's tough because I'm not sure if Bev Priestman's job is easier or harder now when she has to select her Olympic squad, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got, I mean, as we've mentioned, like players like Evelyn Vian knocking on the door and playing so well that it's really hard not to bring her to Tokyo, right? If you score 2 goals in 2 games, but you've also got so many other players. I mean, do you bring extra fullbacks? You probably want to have Jade Riviere in your camp, right? So that you can do that kind of 50th, 60th minute swap that I love so much, where you put Ashley Lawrence into midfield after starting her at fullback. What was the question? It was what did we learn?
Yeah, give me a couple takeaways from this, because I'm glad you mentioned, like, we wrote a bunch after the couple games on the website, mostly because, like you mentioned, there's so much more to talk about. And did Bev Priestman's job actually get easier? And it definitely did not.
I don't think so.
Maybe what was easier was, there was a little bit on talking about how they aligned up against England, and you mentioned the Ashley Lawrence sort of swap out in midfield, and that happened in back-to-back games. Clearly, that's something that has worked, because people always say that they like that midfield trio of Quinn, Fleming, and Lawrence, but that might be something just for late in the game if you're chasing, or if you want to just add some industry to the midfield. Like what? Yeah, I got sidetracked as well. What's your takeaway from these games?
Yeah, okay. I think one thing that definitely comes to mind as a takeaway is you can probably be pretty confident in the defenders you have, especially the younger ones. I mean, the Vanessa Gilles and even players like Gabrielle Carl and so on. These players are starting to finally show that you can trust them in these kinds of games, and that really makes life a lot easier for, again, as we said, if you want to move Ashley Lawrence around, or if you maybe have an injury or something. I mean, Kadisha Buchanan has missed this camp. Obviously, she's going to start in Tokyo. But even so, like, I think just a general theme around this squad at the moment is that a lot of these younger players that they've kind of been trying to rotate in, even over the last maybe 2 years, you're starting to see that you can actually really trust them to start games and play against really tough opponents, which is really the most important thing at the moment.
Again, Canadian women's national team with no games scheduled for now before the Tokyo Olympics, scheduled for the summer for now. A lot of tentatives, as always, in our world. Before we talk a little bit about the Canadian Premier League, I just want to quickly touch on the CONCACAF Champions League. First off, shout out to York United's Lisandro Cabrera last night, scoring against Monterrey. He's on loan for the Dominican Republic side, and scores against a Liga MX team. I'm not sure if you saw that clip this morning, but it was unbelievable. I watched the first leg, and I mean I think it's Atletico. I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce it. I'm going to wait before I do that. But they looked like they were struggling against, like, Monterrey is obviously quite a good Liga MX side, but obviously great to see players that are scouted at CPL level scoring in the Champions League, right? Oh
yeah, for sure. And I think Cabrera is a guy that York United is obviously really excited about having on our roster. And I mean, they loaned him out to this Dominican side. Again, I also like the name of the club. Is it Pantoja?
Yes, it is. Yes, it's Pantoja.
There we go. Okay, I had it in there. It's really, really cool to see a player that, I mean, is, if you ask York United, a player that's going to come in and be impactful at CPL level. He's scoring against Liga MX sides, and Monterrey is one of the best club teams on the continent, right? So it is really cool to see just that happen. And obviously they got destroyed in the scoreline.
6-1 on aggregate,
right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. So the first leg was I think it was 3-0. It was not the best game to watch. And then also shout out to Toronto FC advancing against Club Leon. What a strange game that was. What a strange game. Justin Morrow scoring with his like backside or whatever that was with the duck and roll. Patrick Mullins being the hero. An incredible game for Toronto FC. Just had to mention that on One Soccer.
Yeah, it was a fun one. I mean, you always love those CONCACAF games, right? It's one of the best times of the year, the CONCACAF Champions League,
and being played somewhere in Florida, which is fantastic. Okay, let's get to some Canadian Premier League content. So most of the West teams are training: Pacific, Edmonton, and Calgary. We decided we would take a stab at what their rosters look like right now and try to put together what we're going to call a best 11 so far out of each team. So full disclosure, Charlie picked the teams in the West. I'll pick the teams in the East next week. We'll start with Pacific FC. I'm going to start splashing them up on the screen.
Send your complaints to me.
So this one, and for people listening, this one's pretty straightforward. Manny Aparicio is the only newcomer. Obviously, you got Caden Chung, Thomas Miller-Jaguar, McNaughton. Jordan Haynes is maybe the only other real big addition to this. And obviously up top, you've got Marco Bustos, Victor Blasco, Alejandro Diaz. Any sort of notable picks out of this group for you?
Not really. I mean, I'll be honest. I think this was maybe the easiest one to do because it's about kind of what they looked like last year. The left back spot is obviously one of the places that there might be competition because in like last year, if everybody was healthy, it probably just would have been Marcel de Jong. He's retired, but Jordan Haynes was pretty good at the Island Games. Maybe that's his spot to lose. The other one is obviously at center forward. I don't know if there's a way to get Terran Campbell on the field as well, but it doesn't really feel like there is a way to get him and Alejandro Diaz in a squad at the same time. So realistically, either of those two players could be the starter. I guess I went with Diaz just based on his kind of pedigree, and I think he really can be one of the better center forwards in the CPL. But we've also seen Terran Campbell be one of the best center forwards in the CPL, so that could go really either way.
And I have nothing to add for this 11. I have nothing. It's definitely the most straightforward. You're bang on. I'm gonna have a lot more to say about some of these other ones.
Oh no.
Okay, let's switch to Edmonton here. Should be able to see that on your screen now if you're watching. So backline pretty much the same as last year in terms of return ease. Charlie Mabasi coming in at left back, and then obviously you're adding Shamit Shome, Fraser Aird, Kyle Porter up top. Maybe my question to you is what players were on the bubble? Like, what were you sort of thinking with this group? Because this could be chopped and changed a little bit, right?
Yeah, Edmonton was a little bit tougher, mostly because there's a lot of players that kind of play similar positions. To be honest, like there's a lot of wingers, I think, on this roster. But I think this is maybe the way to go. Obviously, you've got Easton Ungaro as kind of the towering point at the front of your attack. I like to see a young guy like a Chance Carter coming into midfield here, maybe getting a shot. You've obviously got to find a way to get all of these players like Shamit Shome and Fraser Aird and even Kyle Porter on the field. So I think if you play a 4-3-3, that's maybe the best way to do it. There are players on the bench though that could be useful. I think you've still got Paris G who maybe could come in to one of these spots. Even one of the younger players. I mean, you've got like Marcus Vlado-Segai and so on. But I think this is maybe the best 11 players that Edmonton has, and it's just about finding a way to put them in an 11 together.
Yeah, I mean, Raymond Soria is a name that I was thinking was maybe missing out of this group, but you're right. It might be the best 11 possible. And then we obviously don't know about Tobias Warperseski. He's coming in from Germany, and he's a center forward. So who knows? I don't think he's gonna take over Easton Ungaro's job, but maybe you'll find a job on the wing. Okay, yeah, Cavalry. This one's a bit trickier. A lot of new faces, as you can already tell. Dan Klomp, David Norman Jr., Tom Field in defense, Joe DiChiara, and then it obviously comes in. But this team is quite light up top, and this is something we talked about with Tommy. Obviously, Matthias Roskoff unable to get into Canada from Argentina. He would have been their starting center forward for sure in this group. And now it's Jose Hernandez, who shined in the CPL. Also something we'll talk about with Tommy. What went into this? I mean, obviously the striker role will probably be different. I think Elliot Simmons is maybe robbed in this 11.
Robbed, okay, but yeah, you are right.
I mean,
like
maybe
that is Elliot Simmons is maybe the guy that I don't know if I would say if I'm saying that he should be in this 11 because it's hard to take any of those guys out. But Elliot Simmons is an extremely good midfielder. Maybe him and Adekubi kind of share that spot. Cavalry seems to me like another team where a lot of their attackers are wide players or maybe creative players and maybe not necessarily center forward goal scoring types. So, I mean, it's Jose Hernandez's job to lose at the moment. It also stands out to me though that Cavalry is actually maybe a deeper team than I thought they were before I did this, because you've got good players on the bench here. You got Richard Luca up front. As we mentioned, we got Simmons. You've got Karifa Yao on loan from CF Montreal, who could go in at center back. So I think there's a lot to move around here, and definitely, I think Cavalry more than any of the other teams so far will be able to rotate a lot of these positions, right? Because they've got extremely capable players that would start for most other CPL teams in at least they've got at least one in defense and midfield and up front. So I think this is actually going to be a pretty good team.
Cavalry signed a right back so Mo Farsi can play in the wing. That's all I got. Okay, so this one's the funniest for me is Valor FC, and you've admittedly said that this isn't necessarily a perfect lineup.
Yeah,
I could see you sort of holding your head there. Thoughts on this group? I mean, Amir Soto comes in, obviously. Nestor Monk, another international signing, are sort of the big additions, but otherwise, this team needs a few more players, as Rob Gale has admitted as such on this podcast.
Yeah, Valor was probably by far the hardest of these four for me to put a lineup together, just because I have no idea kind of what position they're putting they're going to play all these players in. I mean, I think at the Island Games, partly just because of injury, but you'd have players playing like 3 different positions throughout the season. I mean, Master Kasher and Stefan Sabara, you could probably swap just straight up. One of them could play fullback and the other one's going to be kind of a wide midfielder. And the same kind of goes for Brett Levi's, who could obviously play fullback if necessary and has done very well there. Up front is kind of interesting for Valor. I think Daryl Fordyce gets in there just based on his experience. I think he'll probably be one of the leaders on this team. And Moses Dyer, I think, was actually pretty good at the Island Games, and I'd like to see him in kind of that dual striker role, which is, I mean, it's a little old fashioned, but I think it really could be the way to go for Valor with the players they have. But this is another team where I think you've got a real group of versatile players, and it's just about, finding a way to get your best players on the pitch, right?
Yes. Yeah. The only thing Austin Ritchie for me should be in place of Daryl Fordyce. And then I'm wondering if there's a way that if you don't think so? You don't think so?
I don't know.
And then I don't know, maybe there's a way you could put, I'm gonna pull it back up. Maybe put Levi in with Moses Dyer on the right. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but, I mean, we're also not even mentioning Kevin Alleman, who
yes, that's true.
Probably should find a way into the squad somehow because he's a very good player. I don't know. Valor, again, they've got a lot of good players that play similar positions. So I don't know what Rob Gale's gonna do with this, and it's going to be interesting to see the first way they line up.
We're going to have to get Rob Gale to chime in on this when it appears on CanPL.ca. Again, a written piece to go along with this will be on the website this weekend. Okay, without further ado, Tommy Wheeldon Jr. Cavalry FC to talk about his return to training, some new players he's looking to sign, and a few other things. We're now joined by Tommy Wheeldon Jr., head coach of Cavalry FC. As we mentioned just before, Tommy, you guys are back in training. It seems like a lifetime since you were probably able to do anything like this. Maybe my first question is, what does this mean to you specifically, and then for the players to finally get back out there?
I'm not sure. Like,
that's a tough question, because it means, like, you know,
I don't know. Do you know? It's funny because I get that question a fair bit. You know, what does it feel like? And I don't know. Like, I think because you became so numb with not being able to play, that when you have it, you're overwhelmed with, oh my goodness, this is how we play. It's how we train again. And you know, myself and the coaching staff, you know, Martin, Leon, and Santi, we're trying to make sure that, you know, we're rusty too. So you got to make sure that you're doing what's right for the players as well as yourself. And I tell you, it's just brilliant, because just being outside, being able to train properly, I think that's great for everybody's physical and mental well-being. And I think I said when we returned to training, you know, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And, you know, we've now taken a few back to where we want to be. And that's, you know, playing at home here at Spruce Meadows in front of our fans again.
Oh yeah, that'll be amazing when we all get back to that. I don't know how many of these training sessions you guys have gotten in yet, but do you have any super early kind of first impressions of what this group kind of looks like so far? I mean, it's been a very long off season. It's a long way to go, probably. Just what are you kind of seeing from the first couple of days?
They're in better shape individually, I think, than they would in any preseason. But I think when you have a 200-day off season, you go one or two ways. You can either develop a dad bod, or you can develop a good bod. And I think most of the lads really have been, you know, a due diligence towards, you know, the latter. And even the coaching staff, in fairness, we can still fit into
Tommy, I was just going to say, who's got the dad bod versus the good bod? What's the ratio? Among staff too.
You know what? I think Men's Health put out there that women are finding the dad bod quite sexy. So that bodes well for all of us that are in our 40-plus generation. So there is a little bit of that. But we can still fit into last year's Macron gear. So we haven't overindulged too much while, you know, pinning ourselves in our front room watching, you know, any Amazon Prime documentary or Netflix that we can think of. So it's yeah, I think, I'm proud of the staff for being able to fit back in their gear.
That's the first test, eh? Can you fit?
Yeah.
Let's talk about
fitness test. That used to be the fitness test. If you couldn't fit back in your shorts back in the day, you weren't cleared to play.
I love that. We'll get footage of that and splice it in. I'm sure we'll ask you to. We want to talk about Matthias Roskoff, because this just dropped. Recording this on Thursday, and mutually terminated his contract. He's from Argentina. You were just telling me before he has a wife from Uruguay, so he has a potential to play there. You know, it makes a lot of sense, right? You can't travel because of COVID-19. You know, visas are such an issue. Can you give us and the people listening to this, like, a bit of insight into how, you know, truly this is all impacted, right? International players coming into the CPL has still been impacted. Can you give us a bit of insight, maybe from how Matthias's situation played out?
Yeah, I mean, first off, Matthias Roskoff is a hell of a player. We were excited to have him. He's come through the Boca Juniors system. He's, you know, still only 22, turning 23 this year. Represented Argentina through the 17s and 20s. The lad had all the tools that, you know, part of this foreign rule implementation with or protocol to bring in 4 under 23. You know, there's a nervousness and excitement from when I put my GM hat on, because you want to make sure that you're getting the right players on. And he would have certainly improved the league. He would have improved our team. And then as time gets on, you know, you start to learn about the differences in the embassies in each country, and the visa implications that, you know, you experience in Central and South America and in Africa. You know, these are tough places to get approval to bring players through. So as it went on, you know, we signed him, I think, we agreed terms back in November, which wasn't too long after the Island Games. You know, it put in all the necessary visa and paperwork, and usually anything like that can take, you know, a couple of months, 3 months, but we had time. We're now getting into training camp, nothing. We couldn't track anything. You know, the immigration lawyer's been fantastic trying to help us with all the other ones. We couldn't get anything, and we talked to him constantly, and, you know, things start to get tight, whether it's financially, whether it's just wanting to play. And the lad's young and he's got time on his side, and his wife's from Uruguay, he's from Argentina, so he could play on either side of the countries. And we just sat down and, as a club, said, look, what's right for both parties? And first and foremost, the player came first, and we said, look, let's give him the opportunity to play, earn a living, and stay within his, one of the two countries. And that's how it came back. There's no harm, no foul. The lad left on very good terms. It's just unfortunate we didn't get a player like that due to the current pandemic restraints.
Yeah, it's definitely such a kind of difficult situation. I think that every club has had to navigate. And I mean, especially, on the personal side for these players, but maybe on the footballing side then for Cavalry, you guys now are down a forward, right? Mm-hmm. So just what do you maybe make of the group that you still do have there? And I mean, I know there's a couple other international guys in that group, like Richard Luca and Jose Escalante. I don't know if you know that you're going to have them, or just
good. So the good thing about Jose Escalante, he's back to haunt the defenders for this season.
And riding corner flags,
haunting defenders, and everything in between, and delivering whipping free kicks and corners. So we're delighted to have Jose back. Again, he's another one that he was an original. It was tough that he couldn't get in. We understood it. Couldn't get to the Island Games. Couldn't get his visa in time. Central America, it's hard. He went on to play for Vida in the Honduran League, which, as we've seen in the CONCACAF with Marathon and Olympia, it's a good league. We've seen it with the Olympic team. They're quality players. So we're delighted to have him back. He's in the country now. He's quarantining. He's got another week of quarantine before he can join us training. Richard Luca, he's had his visa approved. He's waiting for it to return from the embassy in Brazil, which was shut down because everything was in full lockdown there. So these are lads that have been patient enough to persevere to get here. That's tough. That's tough to do. Mm-hmm. So we'll be delighted when we've got creativity in them. We've already agreed terms with a couple other strikers that we've got that we'll announce here shortly. So as a club, our recruitment strategy, you're always going to have a plan A, B, C, D, and E. You're always going to have players if they don't get into the country. We learned that last year. Marcus Haber is a great example of that. As once we couldn't get a couple of attacking pieces in, we got Marcus, and Marcus was terrific for us. And then he got the opportunity to go play in Cambodia, did so. So we've got our plans. We think, just having seen the players that are here and that we do have, we look very dynamic, and which is part of the way we play. We're a very attack-minded football team, but also quick to close people down. So, it looks very good at this point.
That's all you're going to give us? Just 2 strikers? That's maybe enough, actually. That's maybe enough for fans.
I think that's pretty big, actually. I think that's pretty good.
Oh yeah. Okay. Hold on. I need to go into the solo thing. Yeah, I can't quite see it. That's perfect. That's excellent.
And I've thrown up random names. You'll see Cristiano Ronaldo up there as well. It doesn't mean I'm signing them. I'm just trying
You've got some formations up there. You've got that little kind of 4-2-3-1 in the blue there.
I'm trying to zoom. I'm trying to zoom in.
It didn't do me any good. I had to change to a 3-4-3 because the forwards not getting the country. Listen, we'll play any formation. I think it's whatever players we got available. We'll put it. Formations are always secondary to our principles.
I wonder if there's going to be any CPL coaches trying to zoom in on that board right now, just behind us on the video.
I want
to ask about the Sean Fleming piece that Charlie put together for the website this past
article,
weekend.
well written, by the way. That was fantastic.
Well, most of the stories were from you, so thank you.
you put the ink on the paper, or I guess in this one I typed it in. But no, it was very well written. And I think, actually, I spoke to Sean this morning. He was humbled. And do you know what really got to him was the fact that people said such nice things, but also by his dad. His dad is often a forgotten man that, was a trailblazer. And I think in a time now where we've got the Canadian Premier League, we've got to recognise the trailblazers that in Canadian football world that have gone before us. And, the Flemings have certainly played more than their part.
Mm-hmm. If you haven't read it already, go check it out on the website. Is there one story in there that was your favorite, or anything that comes to mind that maybe wasn't featured? Like the Jonathan David Alphonso Davies moment is crazy. that Fleming brings him in, and you were there, right? You saw that for the first time for Canada. Like, that's obviously a big story. Anything else that comes to mind?
I think Balou Tabla was another one. Balou Tabla was this kid out of Montreal. He hadn't signed for the Impact yet. And what you'll know about Sean Fleming's teams, you'll see this over the course of time, that he's very well organized coach. He knew, and that's why he had success in CONCACAF. As we've seen, CONCACAF's a tough beast to go down to. We've noticed that with the Olympics. These Central American teams have a savvy about them, have a gamesmanship, are very good in possession, and always have that little bit of maverick about them. What Sean would do well is he would get good players around that was very well organized, could know how to defend. But you look at his groups, he'll always have a bit of an ace up his sleeve, and whether that be a Hansen Boakai and a Bustos in his 96 group, a Kevin Alleman in the 94s. He had Jordan Hamilton as well. But in our group, we had Borges and Tabla, and that was before we hit the 2000s with Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David. But Tablo hadn't really done a ton yet. He was just a player that Sean had identified through these camps that this kid could dribble, he could move well, he did things that most Canadians hadn't. And we have to remember that this is a time where there wasn't 11 Canadian professional teams and academies that were around. There was just a few, and he was able to spot talent very well and merge them into a very well organized team. I remember Borges scoring a cracking goal against Mexico. And we tied that game 1-1 that got us through. I think we topped the group to go through to the playoffs. But he always managed to find them, and I think that was a gift of Sean's.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the things that was most fascinating to me was the way, I think both Tommy, you said this, but also Sean told me this himself. Like, he kind of would reach out to other sports and take things. Like, he was telling me about how he would talk to Hockey Canada about how they get these guys in from junior teams to play together on a World Junior team, because that's always a tough thing for an international coach, right? When you get all these guys who don't know each other that well and have to put them together for a short tournament. And I mean, obviously it kind of also results in hilarious anecdotes like Mr. Randy Gregg.
Yeah, so honestly, and I'd read previously somewhere, I think Rob Gale got played on that one too. And I just think it became their double act, like Morecambe and Wise or Laura and Hardy. They just went along with it, but it actually suited both Randy's and Sean's personality. Both were humble. They were there as people and brought in the best people possible, and we've all benefited. Sean's worked with a lot of us CPL coaches. He was assistant to Stephen Hart, and he was the head coach for myself and Rob Gale and others around that. But there's another cracking story, because the group before I joined in was the 94 group that did well in the World Cup. I think they tied with England when Quinlan Roberts scored over John.
Oh, yeah.
But I think in that game, Sadi Jalali, who was the lad from Edmonton at the time, scored. So when the journalists are doing the post-match interview after, he's like, "Oh, what club's he from?" And they noticed that EDM Juventus. So they're like, "Oh, Juventus, Serie A Juventus." So they put in there about Sadi Jalali was playing for Juventus, and Sean went, "No, like Edmonton Juventus." And they're like, "Is that like okay?" And he's like, It's a grassroots club in Canada, but again, that speaks to Sean was able to unearth these talents, and Sadi was a cracking player and really should be, if his life had panned out differently, playing well in this league. Because I think sometimes, and that's a lesson that I've taken away from Sean, and hence why you see the Mo Farsis and the Joel Watermans that we've had. Is I took that. My dad was very similar too. That you don't always. I think there's too much structure in development football. I think we overcomplicate it. And sometimes you've got to take the kid that's hungry. You've got to take the kid that's the outlier and give them a chance, because often it's those, street skills or the adversity that they've had, or they go and put it on the pitch. And I think as a nation of Canada, we've got to take a bit of that, because sometimes we can be too nice, too conservative and make everybody accommodate. Whereas actually sometimes it's the ones that are a little rough around the edges that have had a tougher path. They're the ones that can win your football matches.
Well said. And again, if anyone who hasn't read that already, go to the website right now. The Randy Gregg bit is great. How many Stanley Cups did he win? 5?
5. I think
5.
5.
Yeah.
With Wayne Gretzky.
He's a baseball guy. Don't worry about it. He's a baseball guy.
Killer. Kill me with his baseball cleats. Kill me.
Okay, Tommy, before we let you go, we got to talk about Jose Hernandez. The ECPL final played out on Wednesday, and he went the distance and almost won. He's your player. Did you know he was this good at video games?
I didn't. It was Elijah Adakubi that had mentioned to me that in a bit of the off season, a little bit actually, they were playing a lot in so in the island games, you got your ping pong group, you've got the sequence game, the lads, the card games, Uno games, and FIFA games. And I think Elijah and Bruno Zebi and a few other lads, they fancy themselves on that. And then Jose Hernandez would challenge them to it. So apparently it was quite close games, but Jose kept coming through and, had bragging rights for dinner. But I think really what's helped him through this, and this is the power of video games, is that I think he's played a lot in the off season and just got really good at it. And I think now at the point where he's actually beaten, lads are telling me about he's going viral with some of the things where he's beaten, professional players at it, which is a whole new world. So, credit to him. He's, raised the standard for us, and there he is. But I just hope his feet move as fast as his fingers come the season.
This was I just had to play these clips because this was Charlie and I's favorite. Like, he just going off on the celebration. This was so passionate about it. It's so passionate. I love it. Hopefully
representing the club.
First Meadows.
Well, do you know what? It is a thing about Jose. He didn't get to see the best of him, and he obviously had a short, because of his the short season last year. Look at him.
I knew this would be just perfectly distracting for Tommy. This is.
But do you know what? In training, he's got a bit of this. And what I say about these players that are rough around the edge, he played for a former teammate of mine, Kurt Bosch. Played at the Storm together for Edmonton Juventus with the 2000 group. So he would have played with or against, Alfonso coming through. And he always had this. He was always that next level where he played like a street kid, where he just would take players on. He would press people. He had this freedom about him. So I just enjoyed seeing that. And this is a kid that I think he'll be a sleeper this year because he's got that bit of an edge to him. We've just got to make sure that we have a longer season now to show it. But mark my words, this kid's a good kid.
Well said. A great place to end it. Tommy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, boys. Listen, look after yourself, and we'll see you on pitch at some point.